This is the battlefield in Laos. These are government troops supported and financed by the United States, fighting and losing ground to communist troops, many of them from North Vietnam, fighting in remote mountains in an obscure corner of Asia. It looks and sounds familiar.
The Vietnam War started in 1955 due to conflicts between the French and the Communist Vietnamese. This resulted in the Communists gaining control of northern Vietnam, while the French established the South Vietnam state. The war was sparked when the Communist North Vietnam started helping South Vietnamese rebels fight their government. The war cost $200 billion. The Vietnam War is the longest war the U.S. participated in, lasting 17.4 years. 8,744,000 U.S. troops served during the Vietnam War, and 58,220 died. 1.3 million militants died in total from all countries involved. 1 million civilians died during the war as well. John Stryker Meyer was a veteran of the Vietnam War. He was a part of the Green Beret. The Green Beret is the special forces of the U.S. Army. One of the Green Beret's primary roles includes reconnaissance. There are rigorous qualification training in order to become a Green Beret. Most candidates are eliminated during these trainings. The Green Beret participated in a special operation during the Vietnam War known as the MACV-SOG. The MACV-SOG operated in enemy territories and neutral countries with North Vietnamese presence to obtain enemy information. Due to the operation in neutral countries, they were not allowed to carry any sort of identification like dog tags. Veterans who served in this war were not allowed to discuss this war until 20 years later. The SOG used the CAR-15, which is a variant of the M16. Instead of a 30-round magazine, the CAR-15 used a smaller 20-round magazine. This was the most common used gun.
In my case, I was really lucky because the South Vietnamese on my team, like I get there in '68, at least 4 or 5 of them had been fighting secret missions across the fence for 2 years, and they were really good. And the American had to earn their respect. And I forget if I had it in the book or not, but basically, you know, we have a team. So we had the Americans would be in our hooch, and then the Vietnamese had their team room, just to have all the bunks and everything. And then they would cook their meals at night, and we also had a mess hall for them. So by the way, when I came into camp, it was 50 years ago today. And when I came into camp, a recon team, Idaho, went out on a mission. 2 Americans and 4 South Vietnamese. They disappeared. They still remain missing today. So that was my introduction to the Secret War.
Yeah.
And a guy I had gone through training group with was there, and he became the team leader, and that's how I got on the team. And we had several other teams that got wiped out, literally. So that was the drill. And so Glenn Lane and Robert Owen are still missing in action today. And we still have 1,597 Americans that are still missing in action in Southeast Asia from the Vietnam War. There's a growing interest in the Secret War now. Because when we entered the Secret War, we signed documents saying we would not talk about it.
Exactly.
For 20 years.
For 20 years, yeah.
We signed a document so nobody could talk about it. And so after 20 years, I began writing some stories for Soldier of Fortune magazine. I used a pen name. And we did these stories talking about some aspects of the Secret War, some of the missions. And now there's a growing interest in the Secret War 50 years later. So those that really care thrive on the detail. Again, it's over time. It's the similarity between the sports here. You know, the first day of the football team, you got 150 guys.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get around to the preseason, it's down to 130. You get to the season, it might be 90. Well, in our case, because of special forces, and are you all familiar with the Green Berets, the difference between the Green Berets and regular Army? Yes or no? Just give me a yes or no nod.
No.
Okay. During World War II, they had the OSS, which was the Office of Strategic Services.
Yeah.
That was the forerunner of today's CIA. And during World War II, they had what they called Jedburgh teams. 2, 3, 4 Americans who would jump in behind enemy lines to work with the French, the people in Belgium against the Nazis, and they did it against the Japanese. And they would jump in behind enemy lines and work with indigenous troops. As the Cold War emerged after World War II and the Korean War, they said, we need something like Spec Ops.
Yeah.
So they started out recruiting people for what became Special Forces. In 1952, they had the first detachments in Germany because that was where the Cold War was escalating with Russia in East Germany, and we were in West Germany. And through that, the Special Forces grew to be the top military unit. Like in my day, if a person was drafted, they go through 8 weeks of basic training, 8 weeks of advanced training, have a month leave, and go to Vietnam. Well, I read the book, The Green Berets, that came out, and in it they talked about the additional training, the people, the characters who were they sometimes didn't fit into society, but they were smart, or they just had a little bit of an attitude. Yeah. So it took me 2 years to flunk out of college. But I read the book and said, okay, I flunked out.
Yeah.
They're going to draft me. I read the book and says, I want to try to go with these guys, because the training, after you go through basic and advanced infantry training, then you go to jump school.
Yeah.
Learn how to jump out of airplanes. And then after that, we went to Special Forces training. And depending on your military job, it could be commo, which would take 12 weeks of training. Medics, the Green Beret medics to this day are still the best medics in the world. Their training, after they're done with their regular training, their military occupational training is over a year long, including at the end where they shoot a goat and they have to come back and patch up the goat and heal them so they can live. And you might say, well, that's kind of cruel, You got PETA and all these people saying, how you can be so cruel to animals? Well, you're cruel to animals like that because you want your medics to know how to treat a combat wound.
To save a human life.
Yeah, so when it's time, if you're in the field, you always want a medic on your team. So if anybody gets wounded, they can keep you alive. It's the only thing I would ever do. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Because the men I served with, the Americans, were amazing. And the South Vietnamese were incredible. That's one of the bad things. We had like a tour of duty. It would be a year tour of duty. I came home, went back. And when I went back on a second tour, we were much closer. And I used to go to the Vietnamese mess hall at night, eat supper with them, the rice and the chopsticks and everything. And then that tour of duty ended, and I left. I came back to America, and those guys were still there.
Yeah.
And that just gnawed at my gut for a long time. But in answer to your question, Special Forces at the time, and it still is to this day, it's still the best trained counter-guerrilla warfare unit. I mean, you see a lot about the Navy squeals.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, SEALs.
SEALs, yeah.
And you hear about our Marines, and Marines have MARSOC,
Yeah.
Which is specialized, but they don't train in the language, they don't train in the culture like we do, and they don't work with the indigenous people like we do. Like today, right now, there's more than 100 Green Beret A teams throughout the world that are working either with small countries or larger countries to help them help themselves. We're not there to conquer them.
Yeah.
We're there to help train them.
Saying you got that.
You know what? Probably just got a hamburger somewhere.
Just got a hamburger?
Yeah. Because remember, when I came back in, my tour of duty went from end of April 68 to April 69. Came back, anti-war protests were on, and you wore your uniform at the airport. There are people that gave you dirty looks, and some of our guys were spat upon.
Yeah.
And all this kind of stuff. So I didn't have any of that. I just had people look at me and some go shout, baby killer.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. So, but I just went to the local, whatever it was, to get a hamburger and some french fries. Because the hamburgers and french fries there just weren't the same.
Yeah.
My oldest girl was in middle school. And my wife and I, we were married. And when I married her, she had 2 boys, I had 2 girls. We had 4 teenagers in the house at once. And then we had a baby. And my oldest girl had asked some questions, and I said, I talked to my wife about writing it for the family. So the first drafts, we did some stories, worked on it. I got a guy who put together a book, talked about the ideas, came back and worked on it some more. And by the time my daughter graduated from high school, she got a scholarship, my oldest girl. And it was through our association, and every scholarship is named after a Green Beret killed in action. Like today, we still have 50 Green Berets in Laos that are missing in action from the Secret War. So those names are on the scholarship. So I talked to her about it. Her curiosity came more, and we talked more. And then eventually, she became a copy editor. So she's the editor of my book, but I did it for the family. I figured if I get run over by a school bus, I don't want to depend on Joe Bip the Ragman telling my story, or that commie loving Ken Burns telling my story. I want to hear from Dad.
Yeah.
I've been involved with a few veterans groups, and the thing I'm most proud of was my time in service. And my second tour of duty, we were very busy. And again, when I came back, I was in camp 3 or 4 days. Guys I knew from my first tour of duty went on a mission. They disappeared and were never heard from until 2010. And they recovered their remains, and we buried them at Arlington in 2011. But that time in service with the Green Berets was, to me, that's the experience that everything else is secondary to. Again, family, children, that grows in significance. And I worked at a newspaper, and then in 2008, the newspaper, I got laid off because they were shrinking their staff size. And then I went to work for a nonprofit to help veterans get affordable housing, and now I work here in Orange County with a nonprofit that helps veterans get affordable housing.